Can we all get seated so that we can start with our proceedings this morning? We are 7 minutes behind schedule, so we'll have to catch up. Thank you very much for your indulgence. Minister of Higher Education and Training, Mrs. Naledi Pandor, delegates from Botswana who are representing the Human Resource Development Council in that country, a delegate from Germany who is here today because we've got quite a number of programs with our TVET colleges that the Germans are supporting. The Deputy Chair of HRD Council of South Africa, Comrade Begin Chalinchali, the Chairperson of the Portfolio Committee in Higher Education and Training, Ms. Connie September, representatives from all our sector education and training authorities, our colleges, universities, representatives from the industry, and from all our institutions. You are warmly welcomed this morning. We may know that one of the mechanisms of addressing the triple challenge of poverty, inequality, and unemployment within South Africa is education and skills, which everybody in this room is about. Education and skills development accelerate the reduction of poverty and inequality as well as unemployment, whilst stimulating economic growth, thereby reducing levels of unemployment in society. Human Resource Development Council of South Africa has been tasked with working towards enabling South Africa's citizens to achieve their full potential. This it does by working with various social partners to drive collaborations on the development of skills that are required by government as well as by industry at large. So this summit, as you have deliberated already yesterday quite extensively, has focused on positioning human resource development as both a catalyst and game changer, which is the main objective of the HRDC, of accelerating skills development in critical sectors of the economy. So the theme of this summit, as we all know, is partnerships that will revitalize work and learning, has allowed industry leaders, labor experts, civic organizations, government departments, and academics to unpack the key focus areas, amongst of which are youth employment, the fourth industrial revolution, partnerships that work, relationships between work and learning. So this area of skills development for employment and prosperity is fraught with dynamic challenges as they confront us at the moment. What was relevant today might be redundant tomorrow. Hence the need for continuous engagement with our social partners and refining of our action plans. So the latest challenge being the fourth industrial revolution, which is poised to impact on how we pretty much do everything about skills training and education generally. Today, ladies and gentlemen, we will receive inputs, firstly from the Honorable Minister of Higher Education and Training, Mrs. Naledi Pandor, as I've acknowledged already, and the feedback with recommendations from various commissions after their lengthy deliberations of yesterday afternoon. It is these recommendations, therefore, that the HRDC will need to take into account when refining their action plans towards skills training and development in the country in order to ensure that South African citizens are developed to full potential. In collaboration, therefore, with our social partners, we must ensure that there is a pipeline of capable individuals to drive economic growth within South Africa and ensure, as Africa's most industrialized country, we remain at the forefront of innovation and continue to attract inward investment as we build our future. I would like to take this opportunity, ladies and gentlemen, to welcome on stage to address us the Minister of Higher Education and Training, Mrs. Naledi Pandor, who doesn't need any further introduction beyond that. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you very much, DG, for the words of welcome. The DG mentioned I'm Mrs. Pandor so many times. It was as though he's telling everybody she's married, so hands off. And I couldn't quite understand who gave him permission to do that. Because I may have interests, DG, beyond you know, where I'm located. So I do ask you, don't curb my style. So then, ladies and gentlemen, let me acknowledge the Director General, Mr. Ngonde, the Chair of our Portfolio Committee, Ms. September, our Deputy Chair of the Human Resources Development Council, and I also wish to make reference to Ms. Brenda Ntombela, who manages our Secretariat and I think does excellent work for the Human Resources Development Council. And then allow me to also acknowledge any council members present here, our various partners, and distinguished guests. Well, when I walked in, the first thing I thought was, for a summit on such an important subject, this is a very small summit. Given where we are as a country on human resource development and the massive task that we face. So I hope for future iterations of this meeting, we're going to reimagine it to really secure the broadest participation and support of South Africans in this most important endeavor for our country. This is the critical challenge that confronts South Africa. And it is an area that we fail to find responses to at our peril. This is the heart of the matters we must crack. So I'm pleased to have the opportunity to speak to you about this important subject of partnerships, of work, of learning, and to perhaps begin somewhat my entry into the work that you've been involved in for many years. Of course, I have been a member of the council, so I'm aware of much of its work, but I've been away from the coalface of education for several years, and so it's going to be an interesting tutorial for me, this particular summit, and I'm most interested in hearing the reports of the commissions, because I'm keen to get a sense of what we're doing and how we believe we will grapple with this need to build solid partnerships with industry, with employers, in order to give young people in our country a hope that they've never really had before. I regard the summit as a very important meeting, which for me provides a platform for us to reflect on skills and employment creation, as well as our advances or failures in this challenging task of securing more competent, enabled, absorbed, active, and skilled human resources. That is how I would describe what we need to do. In this year, 2018, you are going to hear all of us, all political leaders, refer in their speeches to former President Nelson Mandela and Mama Albertina Sisulu, two great South Africans who served as living examples of commitment, discipline, and sacrifice. I believe their lives should give us the courage to vigorously pursue the human resource development objectives that draw us together each year. It is my view that we have at least 5 objectives which should form the basis of our interactions and our evolving partnerships. First, we need to offer practical opportunities for skills development to a very diverse range of young people and adults. You know, sometimes we class all young people as being the same thing, as having the same attributes, as having the same interests. I think we need to begin to develop a deeper appreciation that we're dealing with a very diverse, multifaceted population group that requires very, very flexible, imaginative, creative responses to their specific needs. So this skill set that we provide has to go well beyond formal education and life skills training into actually identifying this makeup of that diversity and how we might more effectively respond to it. I believe our partnerships would perhaps at the inception level have to include and focus on critical literacy and numeracy skills, and include occupational and professional programs which lead young people into work and entrepreneurship opportunities and positions, and lead working people into leadership in their organizations and workplaces. So what we do must, in other words, make a difference. I worry sometimes that we believe training in and of itself and in number makes a difference. But what we have to do is a practical realization of opportunity beyond the training. That those young managers that we take through our leadership programs become leaders. Those young people we take through our base training programs become employees, or even better, entrepreneurs. I worry when we talk about partnerships for work and learning. We're not talking about partnerships for business formation. We're saying to young people, ready yourselves to be an employee. And I fundamentally differ with such a definition. I believe what we need to talk about much more and to infuse in the discourse we have is prepare yourself, yes, maybe to be an employee, but even better to have your own enterprise and to employ others. That is a characteristic we must imbue in young people through our training programs. And maybe our notion of entrepreneurship has become quite narrow, and that's why we don't refer to you establishing your own business. Because we're thinking that business is having a spaza shop. But actually, if you have a laptop, you can start a whole range of services which could generate an income for you. So let's insert enterprise formation into much of what we do. I still feel it is absent. We need then, I think, when we have summits, to really have the kind of summit that gives hope to young people and that clearly indicates to them that we understand their plight and we have solutions to it. We need to move away from defining the problem. We're all very good at description, all very good at defining. But what young people want are solutions. They want responses. They want to know your presence, your conversation means that tomorrow, next week, next month, their life will be different. Otherwise, if we rely on us interacting in this way and defining everything very, very well, and using good English like I do, and of course I also use good Setswana and good isiZulu and good isiXhosa and many other languages. So using very good discourse sounds very nice, sounds powerful. But next month, as that 24-year-old, I'm still in the same space. There's something wrong with that. So when we gather, they should know something is going to happen in their life. And that's why I actually want the nature of our summits to somewhat change. Now, I know that I might not be here next May, and there's not much that one can do between now and next May. But what I'm thinking about, DG, because you probably will be here, you've got a contract, is part of what we might think of is annually at the summits, we invite 100 young people. And we have partners here who will secure firm partnerships with those young people that assure them of a future. So part of the summit must become a contracting space, for want of a better word. So that young people see we are making a difference and we are serious. When we look at what Stats SA has been reporting recently on unemployment, those reports point to troubling levels of unemployment, particularly among the young in our country. Our summit has to help us move beyond numbers and into what I'm proposing, concrete programs. Our National Development Plan outlined what South Africa needs to do to address poverty, inequality, and unemployment. One of the areas that the National Development Plan spent a great deal of time on was that notion of social compacts as effective tools for collaboration that leads into practical action. And they indicated that these broad-based social compacts were a strategic imperative if we were to make success out of what our country needs to do together. So, the second task then for me is that we must embrace the creation of innovative partnerships to advance our national goals. I'm really thrilled as I visited the exhibition booths and spoke to various persons, that we have a significant presence of partners here. And I hope that at the conclusion of our deliberations, we will have come up with some concrete collaboration strategies and have developed, shared, and agreed programs beyond what we have for young people in our country. If I were a young person, and unfortunately I'm many decades away from that, even the CEO from Botswana reminded me that I taught him at school in Botswana. So it means I'm really old. If my former students are now CEOs, I've really passed, that gate. So we must ensure that our work results in real partnerships, in real programs, in real partnership collaboration. We were charged by the National Development Plan, our Vision 2030, to pursue the following human resource development tasks, and they make up a very interesting mix. Firstly, that we must reduce income inequality and work and training discrimination substantially by 2030. Comrade Nchali, there's a very interesting article today in the Mail and Guardian. And it's an article written by someone about a task we've not really undertaken. And that is to address inequality by providing regulatory frameworks that mandate closing the gap between the highest earners and the lowest earners. And that article is saying you and I, you in the powerful COSATU, me as an executive member, need to work together to find a way of ensuring that the median range in South Africa is one that accommodates the up of income of many poor people in our country. Because the article asks the question, how come we don't have a statutory framework or regulatory framework which says you cannot earn 35 million a year as a CEO and have a cleaner earning 36,000 a year? There's something sick in that. So I hope, Comrade Nchali, you and I will become the advocates of the need to close that gap and not just to talk about inequality. I hope with Stats SA that they won't only publish unemployment statistics, but will start pointing out what are the things that should be done, what is the comparative perspective on what works, and how does South Africa measure against other countries that have had to confront such challenges. So, Deputy Chair of the Council, here's a subject that I think we need to take up as South Africa as one of the tasks on human resource development that we were given by the National Development Plan. The second that the National Development Plan referred to was that we have to have a significant growth in the number of small, medium, and micro enterprises, and that their variety, not just their number, but the variety of these businesses must be exponentially expanded. The third was that we need to produce millions of skilled artisans in our country with due regard particularly to scarce skill domains. All these targets require us to establish partnerships between industry and colleges, between innovation hubs and our universities, between colleges, between our community colleges, and that we should make strategic use of research to design these partnerships. One of the things I had been working on while serving in my previous deployment was the use of what we were calling evidence-based decision-making. You know, we tend to be really good brainstormers, but we don't make good use of evidence to generate approaches for us. Now, one of the things that I think is part of my 5 is this third one, that we should begin to make better use of research to influence our decisions. We need to stop brainstorming responses and rather give greater support to our think tanks and universities to investigate possible models for realizing our goals. The chairperson of the Portfolio Committee, Ms. September, would tell you that whenever they call various collaborators, including ourselves as government, into the portfolio committees in Parliament, they can't even stop us talking. We have a long laundry list of things that we believe we're doing. But if they pose the question to us, so Minister, given this multitude of programs that you are implementing, why does unemployment continue to rise? They get a silence because we're not looking at whether our programs are actually suited to the nature of problem we're confronted with. So I think critical and better use of evidence, of research, is absolutely necessary. I'm pleased, in fact, that the modus operandi of the Human Resource Development Council does include a fairly full program of commissioned research and integration of research outcomes into programs we initiate. I believe that a significant growth of such research and initiatives and testing, whether they are efficacious, is absolutely necessary and possible. My 4th we must do is that we have an abundance of partners possible in South Africa and globally. We need to use these partners to good effect. In working with the Council, I've been encouraged at seeing the competence of non-governmental organizations and of trainers working in the training and development space. I've been pleased at some of the work provided by our state-owned enterprises. Despite all the bad media they get, in the training space, there's some useful work happening. I believe a significant growth in initiatives is possible, and I believe as a summit, we will be able to report on the advances we have made and to identify even greater advances that the HRDC should oversee. My 5th and final point is that we should have much greater effort directed at supporting our TVET colleges and our community colleges to become premier trade and occupational skills development institutions. We should build a seamless relationship between the private sector and public institutions and develop successful skills development models through international partnerships. Our history, of course, of apartheid is a history of inbuilt insularity. We need to get rid of that insularity and look at how we use international partnerships to identify programs that would give us strong comparative advantage and that would assist us in areas where we may not at present be resource or skills rich. We hope, as a Department of Higher Education and Training, to continue to work with our colleges to develop innovative specialist focus areas in each region in our country. One of the things I'm really keen on is that we would have institutions whose core remit might be the tourism sector, but it's not training table attendants. It's also ensuring every young person within that college learns one foreign language or two, that they learn a wide range of skills, that by the time they leave that college, they can actually work anywhere in the world. I don't think institutions should prepare young people for local employment. I believe we are preparing global citizens, and we can do so in any institution we are responsible for, depending on the quality and caliber of program that we offer. I believe if we succeed in broadening the program offerings, in developing quality staff, and in providing excellent infrastructure, we will definitely succeed in the ambitious skills targets of our 2030 strategy. So, ladies and gentlemen, being a new kid on the block, I don't have any keynote speech. All I have are ideas about what I think we need to do. And I know, compared to all the countries on the African continent, South Africa, in terms of resources, institutions, persons available, non-governmental organization presence, South Africa is the best placed African country to tackle a human resource development challenge. So, I look forward to working in the next at least 12 months with you all to really advance the wonderful achievements we've already been able to make as a country in the past few years, and to ensure with you that we do entrench the wonderful perspectives of our skills strategy into the skills training framework of our country. So thank you very much for being here, and I look forward to hearing the reports of the commissions rather. Thank you very much, and good morning.
Thank you very much, Minister, for such a rich speech, ideas that we need to take into consideration. Can we give the Minister another round of applause, ladies and gentlemen? I think you agree with me. Well, the Minister is talking about 12 months, but it's worth 12 months that we would be getting the food that will nourish the work that we're doing in the system. The emphasis that what we must look at, it's making quite a measurable impact in the work that we are doing. We don't say we're doing work. It must be seen that really is the work that we are doing and is having tangible results. I think we are on course, ladies and gentlemen, in fulfilling that. Now, we are advised by the program that the Deputy Chair of the HRD Council will take over the reins and run the program to conclusion, at least for the day. The speech that the Minister has delivered will be sent to everyone. Ms. Dombela will make those arrangements so that we can make reference to the provocative thoughts that are in there for us to respond quite adequately. What we are going to do to change the status quo for the better for our youth, because we are here to work out mechanisms of training and empowering our youth better so that they can be able to earn a living, a decent living for that matter. Thank you very much, Minister. We have given us clear marching orders. Deputy Chair is the General Secretary of COSATU.
And the Vice President of Orlando Pirates. Thank you, Comrade Gwebs. Now, Minister, I can't see the notes now. Good morning, colleagues and comrades. My name is Begi Njalinjale. The Honorable Minister Pando, the Chairperson of Portfolio Committee, I need you to emphasize that the Chairperson of the Portfolio Committee of Education is the former Deputy President of COSATU, Comrade Connie September. In COSATU, if you go to the website, there's something called September Commission. We hope that you take time and read it, because I thought the Minister was making her speech from the notes of the Deputy President of COSATU. Members of the HRD Council and EXCO, invited guests and visiting comrades, welcome again to this session. Just want to say, Minister, on Monday, from Monday to yesterday, the BRICS countries were meeting in Mpumalanga. You Brazil, Russia, India, what is the other one? China and South Africa. They were meeting there. And what is similar to what they were debating is almost what we are discussing it now. They were discussing the issues of youth employment, the youth entrepreneurship, the women inequality, the wage gap that you are referring to between the highest and the lowly paid, the future work or the fourth industrial revolution. What is interesting, though, is that what was being debated there was reported globally, but not here at home. The media who was there were media that was, at best, it was a local media. I mean, the radio station in Nelspruit. But the South African media was not interested on these issues. What they were interested on was what is happening in Northwest. Almost all the negative has been reported by South African media. So when we were speaking here, I said, oh, where is the SABC and ENCA and et cetera, and et cetera? And I said, maybe because it is not the juicy stuff that will make good news in relation to those issues. And I agree with you that maybe in our own work, we need to try to promote what we are doing, because the news we get is that there's no skills in South Africa, that there's no Human Resource Development Council that is doing huge work. That work is not reported. No one is interested in that work. But in the competition for foreign direct investment, as we are trying to say South Africa should be the destination of investment, others see it a different way. And with the resolution of expropriation of land, was seen as the black sheep in the world. Nobody should come to South Africa. They will go to an extent that there might be cannibals here that eats people. We have to be able to report, whatever space that we get, that there is something called human resource development that is doing excellent work. It will not, the result won't be tomorrow, because it may take 3 or 4 years to develop the skills that we want to develop. But at least we should be able to report on that issues. Now today we're discussing the same issue, same agenda. The difference I want to make, though, Minister, is that in the BRICS, we're talking about youth employment. Here, we're talking about youth unemployment. And you may think these are the same. The concept, the understanding is the same. There's a lot of youth unemployed. But if you discuss to that extent, you are likely to discuss the problem. The BRICS countries are discussing what kind of job creation for the youth. So they started to be practical. They don't complain. They said we must do this, we must be able to set targets, we must be able to evaluate what we're doing. 2 days ago, I'm not sure whether everybody has seen the story in the Sowetan of a 10-year kid who was regarded as the first kid in South Africa to have developed a robot. It was not on the front page because it's not good news, as I'm saying. It's almost at the back, you know, those old-timers that who play horses, you know, when you go to the newspaper, in the sport, there will be a section where they show the horses. You have to do the betting before you go to sport. It was reported there because it's not seen as a very, very good thing. But if it was in another country, I think it would have been on the first page. It would have been reported in the news and run in that way. You know how one of the TV station ran a story. If they run it from morning for the whole day, if you don't like that story, you rather switch off your TV because they're going to repeat until it sinks in your mind. It's like the CNN. If there's one story, it's going to run 24 hours before they go to another story. So you will not say, I have not heard about this story. They run it to you unless you close your TV and say, you excuse yourself from this thing. Now, may I invite those who are commissioners to sit here because we don't want to take time for you to be walking there, getting applause as we walk to the stage. May they come and sit here. Dr. Sipho Manana, is it here? Or rapporteurs. May they come here. Sipho Manana. Dr. Sipho Manana, Ms. Nomonde Hlachaneni. I think I'm pronouncing right. If I do wrong, please pardon me. I'm originally from Mozambique. Susan Malima. Is Susan here? Where is Commission 3? Who are members of the Commission 3? So where is your rapporteur? Please, can we be assisted so that she can come here? And Commission 4, Dr. Raphael Dingalo. Where is Dr. Dingalo? Is Dr. Dingalo here? Oh, okay. What we will advise is that we are not going back to the commission. We are reporting what was discussed in a commission in 3 ways. What is the objective of the commission so that people get a glimpse? What are the key recommendations and the outcomes. So we'll appeal to the rapporteurs, please be as brief as you can, because all the work that has been done will be loaded to the system. So you don't need to take a lot of time. We'll then have some question of clarity a bit, but please, this is not a point of whether you agree with the report or not, because if we allow that, we're going to go back to the Commission. We don't want to go back to the Commission. We'll find a way where people strongly feel that when they see the report later, the report does not correctly reflect what was said, and find a way of taking those points forward. But we don't want to do it now. We were told, as Minister Pandor was saying, by the Chinese people that the problem with us as South Africans is that we like meetings. We always plan, but we don't implement. So we're going to have another commission, and then we're going to do it again, and we normally don't evaluate what we have done. So we hope the report will be able to tell us in practical terms, measurable terms, what can be done, so that by the next year, Minister, we hope that we must start by evaluating the outcome of the summit before we go to the next. So may I call Dr. Manana to the podium and give you the report. I assume the time you have been told.
Not yet. Is it 10 minutes? Minister, Chairperson of the Portfolio Committee, Chairperson of the Public Service Commission, international guests, and ladies and gentlemen, let me observe all the protocols. I'm a spokesperson of the Commission 1. We had a very good 3 hours of discussion yesterday, and I will refer to about 4 slides that summarizes all what we did. I don't know who is going to be operating. Is it me or at the back? So the first slide just shows who were the presenters. You can move to show the next slide. Okay, this is fine. This is the framework. This is what we shall be covering, the remarks that came from the Commission as well as the recommendations and the Commission statement of outcome. You can move to the next one. There was a set of 3 speakers who dealt with one. The first speaker dealt with the research that had been conducted on spatial differences between cities, towns, and the region. It was done by the CDE. The next one was from the Department of Higher Education and Training. Mampuku gave us a process that is dealing with the determination of the list of occupations that are in high demand and what happens there, as well as the pathways was the third one. Okay. The third one was on the pathways through which training into workplace can happen, and that was a plenary presentation that was done here, but we had to deliberate on it over there. Key issues that were covered in the one on spatial inequalities. I can't see properly there, but I will try. This one is at an angle. You will also assist. Can I come down? But this is not going to help because I don't have a mic.
Take that one, the mic.
Which one?
Mic down there. On the lower, there's a mic there.
Oh. Okay. On the spatial inequalities, there were issues that were made. For example, The first point on the issues was that the spatial inequalities are due to our past legacies that we all know, and these are very acute if you go from cities to small towns and dorpies. And also that the local government sphere should do a lot in terms of institutionalizing what the government is doing to the societies as well as the institutions that are found in those societies. And the fact that the country needs to concretize the strategy for inclusive economic growth. At the moment, there is a lot of talking about it, but there are no concrete steps that should be taken, that are shown that should be taken. The other point that was made is that education is not necessarily an employment strategy. We do need, after dealing with the education part, deal with the employment strategy. Many remarks that were made involve that companies within operations in those areas, like your Bushbuck Ridge and all the outskirt areas, they don't have opportunities for the youth because we're dealing with the youth and their unemployment in this case. The other point is that government needs to incentivize or also insist or hold the MNCs that operate mostly in our private sector to do as they do in their countries. So this is a means of how are they being held accountable or sometimes encouraged or incentivized by government to do what they do in their countries. When it comes to the department, DHET needs to consider spatial inequalities. It does do this. In fact, this was a point that was made by the department that this is being taken care of when they do the planning. The other point is that the government has many strategies. What we need to do is that we need to see how they create synergy towards curbing unemployment of the youth in particular. And the last 3 points were on the recommendations and conclusions that there is a need to transform the economy, decide what kind of economy that will absorb the labor, and that there are options that we can have. For example, if we look at the rural development strategy to create jobs, that could be one of the areas that one can look at, as well as generate opportunities in agriculture, because, for example, in mining resources do deplete, but agriculture, all the time we shall need the food. That there is a need to tackle the advantages of densification in cities. This is the city strategy, or the strategy which is towards the cities as to how to create employment even within the cities. On the next presentation on the list of occupations, we were told that the list has got 369 qualifications that are in high demand, and this is used to give institutions to plan and design qualifications, your universities and your TVET colleges, and it's also for career advisory purposes. The remarks we got was that regional integration and the SADC qualifications framework should be considered, and that the government should look at work opportunities from the SADC region in order to make sure that we exploit the youth unemployment, and the point raised by the minister that languages are important there so that we are able to also get to explore to those shores. Support and focus for the people with the disabilities was missing in most of the presentations, and we need to look at that. And that issues in basic education need to be highlighted as they affect the opportunities for young people. For example, the move within your basic education to higher education. What is the issue about maths literacy, as well as the life orientation? There was a lot of debate around those pipelines that need to be sorted out. In terms of youth unemployment, it was always going to be higher than the overall employment because really, when you look at the youth, it is a subset of the overall unemployment. Recommendations from this commission is that there is a need of linking the work of the HRDC with the National Youth Development Agency, especially within this commission, the commission outcome here should be linked with what is happening in the NYDA in all the other things. With regards to the last point, that DHET should strengthen the career guidance, youth development strategies, as well as indicate to the youth where are the opportunities. Again, the point raised by the minister that in the next summit, maybe we should be able to get the youth involved. The last one, on the pathways, there was a mention that the feeling that most of us were just focusing on really saying nice things, what is wrong currently. And we must maybe look at what is going on well and work on that to get into solutions. Like one of the projects is the YES project that was recently launched by our president, that we must focus on the basics of the labor market and the fact that education is not necessarily going to be leading to the economic opportunities, that it is still part and parcel of a lot of things that must happen. A lot of remarks were given here that frustration by youth in relation to tenders. There was a lot of talk that tenders really don't encourage the youth to continue in businesses. It harms them instead. That the summit should focus on solutions, and companies must stop creating barriers and negative narratives to be saying people have no experience, people are lazy. They should look at how to curb those things or to get what they need. There was also a mention that mass media, through its content, is not reinforcing positive self-development of the youth. They are having content that is actually maybe not taking that people, when they take things into their own hands and in their own faculties, are going to be able to make it in life. That we need a behavior change and give young people the will, all the qualities of work, be it in school or outside school. That mentorship could help here. We need to get mentorship programs for the youth, and that we should look at the TVET stigma within higher education and tackle this, and maybe make sure that the higher education sector works very, very well in this case. That the TVETs should not continue with academic and theoretical focus once they have got those qualifications or those programs in their curriculum. They should focus on making sure that they give skills to the youth. That more information dissemination is needed so that the youth could find support organizations as well, not only to say you should go there, but maybe the support organizations are made to interface with the youth and be in contact with the youth. That the government departments should pool resources for youth development and stop working in silos. So the outcome statement from the Commission is that, in a nutshell, there should be a labor market understanding and optimal economic growth to absorb the youth into employment, and we need to strengthen the role of the informal sector in providing opportunities. That government should coordinate the current policies better, create centers of support for the youth, and avail opportunities. Stop playing gatekeeping roles instead of playing a role of giving access. For example, the qualifications is one of the areas where maybe the government is doing gatekeeping. To rally the important organizations that harness entrepreneurship and take recognition of prior learning seriously as a country. The HRD Council should give a voice to the youth. As the minister has indicated, maybe let us get the youth themselves or youth formations here and listen to their plight and get a buy-in from them as well in charting the way forward. Thank you very much. This is our story as Commission 1.
Thank you very much for the report. Could we then ask comrades, reluctantly though, to ask questions for clarity if there are any? at this level of highly informed people, I think there will be less kind of clarity. I'm not discouraging you, I'm just indicating that, you know, I used to go to the ILO. They took a decision as to how to run the meeting. Even when they ask any hands of clarity, and even when you raise it, they said, I see none. And you try to raise it and said, I see none, and they put that in. The only thing I wanted just to say on the outcome, the last one, it's only really talking about government. And I think we needed to move away when we're talking about jobs to say government. Government should be an enabler if there is an environment that has become problematic. But they are not creator of jobs. And if we don't put that away, I think we are going to be repeating the same mistake. Secondly, when the comrades will be dealing with this report, let's look for new ideas. Because in the council and in the technical working group, we have addressed many of the bottlenecks that comrades might be talking about now. At this stage, let's not go back there. Let's try to get something that will make us to move forward. So I'm suggesting that those who might be coming forward in their own report, just think as you present it, that what is new that you may missing. So let's give them a hands of applause for the commission and call the second commission. There's a clock here, but it's not working. So you still say 10 minutes, 10 minutes, 10 minutes. Who's operating this? Can you operate the clock that when the speaker starts talking, it says 9 minutes, 59 seconds as it goes down? We're not going to stop them, but they needed to be reminded. Thank you.
I'm just waiting for... Okay, and then where will I press? Oh, okay. It's one of those things, ladies and gentlemen. It's part of lifelong learning. Good morning to the Honorable Minister, the Honorable Member of Parliament, Honorable September, the Deputy Chair of the HRDC, the members from various sectors. I will do just as instructed, indicate what the Commission was meant to discuss, what came out of that, and what recommendations were there. I was specifically tasked, Chairperson, to be very economical about time, because we've tried to squeeze something that we could have reported over an hour to 15 minutes. But now I'm told it has to be not more than 10. It's okay. Now I'm okay with that. It will be just the highlights on specific partnerships, the principles of successful partnerships, the challenges, the lessons learned, the recommendations, and the proposals to the Human Resource Development Council. We got 3 presentations. It was Ekurhuleni West College that reported on multiple partnerships with both local and international companies. They had successful stories that saw the college, for example, being given cars and engines by a local automobile industry. It saw them being given opportunity for exchange programs between China and the college. We also had a presentation on a successful partnership that was created by Sasol and 2 TVET colleges in Mpumalanga, the Gert Sibande and Mareka, as you can see there. That also saw a number of things, a number of learners being absorbed in Sasol, a number of learners being given opportunity to learn skills and to be employable in various fields, especially in engineering and in the oil fields. Also, there was a presentation by Harambee Youth Empowerment Center, which saw an empowerment of youth through partnerships, solving the youth unemployment and raising them from learners to be earners. It also indicated how a number of partnerships can actually bring about skills to the young people. There were many examples from the Eastern Cape, from here in Gauteng and 2 other provinces. Why? The principles of successful partnerships. This discussion emanated from the detail of what they discussed as they executed the partnerships, and the members came up with these suggestions as the principles. The first one being all entities in a partnership should gain something from a partnership, whether it's mileage or what, so that these partnerships should not disintegrate. Shared values and goals are very critical. You can't get into a partnership with an organization or an entity that has different value system or different goals from what you have. And shared beliefs, I mean, it is the same. In this instance, in this conference, we are talking more youth employment, youth unemployment. So there must be shared beliefs in terms of how this should be tackled. There must be an element of co-investment, co-sharing of resources, and knowledge and the intellectual property with organizations that are getting into partnerships. The roles and responsibilities of a partnership must be clearly defined so that in the end, they don't get bled and no one is accountable. The alignment of expectations of the role players must be tabled, and the measures of success must be defined. How are we going to see that this partnership is working? Delivery on commitment must be very key. Partners should deliver on what they've committed on. And also partners must be prepared to manage the change. There are challenges that are usually experienced when partnerships are entered into. In some cases, the mindset is that partnerships are an add-on. So you find other organizations are reluctant to get into partnerships. Who's going to do this? We are already in this and this and that. There's a lack of adequate sharing of information, resources, and experiences. There are people who would love to keep resources to themselves or to own information to an extent that they even, they are very, very protective of information. There are limitations to the legislative and regulatory framework in some instances. You find that there are those partnerships that would be critical, but because of the regulatory framework, you find that some organizations are barred from getting into certain partnerships because of their nature or because of their very makeup. There's sometimes lack of capacity to manage partnerships. As a result, some disintegrate. lack of will to be in partnerships by certain organizations. They feel, oh, we are okay on our own, and yet the problems that face the skills arena out there are so varied. The fear of failure, or there are sometimes trust issues. There is a trust deficit these days. Organizations or sectors not trusting each other. There are lessons that have been learned. It was not only out of those discussions, also what was discussed yesterday by the previous presenters. We also drew lessons from those. The first one being that, look, there will never be a right time to start a partnership, to say a partnership will be correct at the beginning of the year, or in the middle, or in the beginning of the financial year. When there is a problem that has been identified and organizations or sectors that can deal with it around, a partnership can be started. Integrate all elements of partnerships at the very beginning so that there is no confusion. Reach out to all stakeholders with similar vision. Check out other forms of collaboration. The Deputy President yesterday indicated that already there are networks that are existing. I think Honorable Minister indicated as well that there are already commitments and agreements with other countries that you can leverage on those. There are ambassadors out there representing the country all over the world. We can leverage on those networks. You don't have to create something new, but what is real is that all partnerships must be managed in specific manners, and it must be understood that there are particular outcomes that must come out of a partnership. In this case, we know it's skills, it's youth employment, it's performance in education, a number of those, but those are some of the critical things that were mentioned here yesterday. No more working in silos. I mean, that is now a way of choice. It has to be our way of life in South Africa. We have to be collaborative. Meaningful partnerships are critical in addressing a plethora of challenges and bottlenecks, as has been stated. I don't have to re-emphasize. These are the recommendations that the group has made. Flexibility is the key as the partnerships are delved into, because we are living in a world of accelerating changes. We must always, in a partnership, leave room for refinement. Partnerships can, in the process, be refined with agreement, concrete agreements, in terms of how or what are the implications now of the slight changes that are being implemented. The partnerships should be focused and outcomes-based, not generic. They must be solution-specific in terms of legislative and regulatory changes to enable delivery. I mean, bottlenecks that relate to regulations, legislation, and policy should be looked into before the partnerships. Recognize and value the investment that have already been made and explore ways to leverage on this. It links up with what I've said before on the lessons learned, that there are already networks. We don't have to go and reinvent wheels in some cases. Build the appropriate institutional mechanisms in order to enable delivery. Anticipate potential glitches and put in place contingency plan to mitigate them. There are those changes that sometimes the partners will have no control over. But in a risk analysis and risk management matter, we must anticipate that in partnerships there will be instances where there are those glitches that will need some kind of change. Hold each other accountable as partners. There must be accountability always. Monitor the progress of a partnership and report on it. We were specifically told in your address, Honorable Minister, that there are certain things that the partnerships have to deliver on mathematics and science, on the employability of the youth, on rigorous skills acquisition, on the quality of the colleges. There must be reports on that. How are we faring? After every year, after every quarter, depending, but there must be something that begins to say, this partnership is working, so that if it doesn't, you think again. Communicate the output and outcomes of partnerships regularly, especially those that have good results. Mr. Njali has indicated here that communication is always about what does not work. These are the proposals now to the Human Resource Development Council. The Human Resource Development Council, through the committees, should come up with a guide on the establishment of these partnerships and distribute it. Create more platforms for partnerships to concretize the collaboration. Give incentives to those organizations that are always ready to be in partnerships, whether they gain or not. Give them some kind of incentives. You will think about that. I wouldn't know what that could be. Include partnership works in the KPAs of the officials, because they are normally the ones who are going to be executing partnerships. Advocate for more partnerships for work-integrated learning. I think, thank you.
Thank you very much. Any question of clarity? She says no. Okay.
I just want to know what is KPA?
Key performance area.
Okay. Any other? Am I looking to you so frightening? Okay, let's give them a hand of applause and ask Commission 3, did we manage to find Dr. Maybe let's take you. Okay. Yes, ma'am. You are here. Okay, wonderful. Wonderful, wonderful. If you want to stand here, if you want to stand there, that's up to you. You have a choice.
So I got the expert advice to be here where it's better. Good morning, everyone, Honorable Minister and summit delegates. This is the third commission that dealt with the issues of the fourth industrial revolution. Before I go to the actual presentation, I just want to indicate that the emphasis of the commission was that the future is emerging or is already here. And as a country, we are at a point where we cannot wait for the future to emerge or to come closer to us. We have to start leading from where it's emerging, which is an age of disruption. And in this age of disruption, it unsettles a number of us, even those who think they are best positioned to handle or tackle the issues of fourth industrial revolution. They're actually not comfortable anymore because it's an age that you cannot avoid, but it has a number of issues. So as we or the green one. Oh, our world today is a VUCA. VUCA not meaning wake up, but VUCA meaning volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous environment. We are in that environment that is actually not making us so comfortable. It's a VUCA world. So it being a VUCA world, is South Africa ready? Or is South Africa not ready? When are we going to be ready? Other countries have been speaking about all these issues for a long time, and we're only beginning to speak to them now. But we're never too late. So there is an interesting race between changing life and education. Looking at that, you can see that there are arrows that are going the same direction, but they're not actually going the same way. The other one is going faster than the other. And looking at down there where we speak industrial revolution and technology, there is an indication of social pain. Social pain is what me and you will be experiencing because of what is coming up now. Because the pain that a person feels physically, or the brain takes you to a point where you feel physical pain. So it's the very same brain that processes social pain. So it means we are beginning to even overload the brain in terms of us not wanting to move at the pace required for us to move. And moving up digital revolution, there are a number of issues that were raised yesterday, but they're also calling for social pain. But the question is, are we able to manage that pain to a point that we strike the balance? If South Africa says all the villages will have internet connectivity, will the people who are there be able to handle all these issues? Because some of them will be scared. We'll kill some of the people because of bringing certain things if people are not ready. But we need to get to a point where this race is balanced. There's also an aspect of disconnect between employers, youth, and educators. There was a presentation yesterday that also spoke about educators who were producing educators. The Department of Higher Education in its universities are producing educators. But these educators, the employers, and everyone are not necessarily connected or interconnected. Respondents who agree that graduates are adequately prepared. This is the graph that is showing. 35% of employers are saying, yes, they're adequately prepared. Youth, 38%, 74% education providers. But when we bring or we take these new graduates to the workplace, they struggle. So then we bring back the issue of whether they are adequately prepared or not adequately prepared. If we were to ask this room and say, how many graduates did you host in your employment or in your workplace? How many of those graduates were prepared? What is it that we can indicate was a factor or determining factor to show the preparedness of these graduates? Because they are coming out of our system. The impact of automation. Industrial revolution is bringing us, there was an argument of it being the new or 4.0, 5.0. So there are a number of names that can be given to industrial revolution. So automation has an impact. I believe there are times that we are going to have receptionists we won't even train receptionists, or those who are aspiring to be receptionists will not have jobs. Because if I can check in Emperor's Palace from the gate, there's no need for a receptionist. I'll have everything sorted out in an automated manner. So the endangered task, predictable physical, process data, collect data. When you look at that picture, it shows us people who are standing. And you ask yourself, what is it that these people are doing? Because we're in an age of automation. They're affected as well, we're affected. And the issue of the percentage of working hours that we have, or that we'll have in the future, will have an impact. And all these things will definitely have positive and negative impact. But will we be able to balance the issues around if we want to leverage in positive impact or want to allow the negative impact of it to derail us? Emergence of new jobs, I won't necessarily go through them. You can see app developer is the pay level is very high. Driverless car engineer, high. Cloud computing specialist is also very high. Uber driver, low. I just went down to indicate the differences. The power of exponential technologies is unavoidable. It's very true. We are not going to get to a point where we'll avoid it. It's here. If global warming is here, exponential technologies are equally here. Not changing is more dangerous. And it's going to be dangerous to each and everyone, especially us as a country. HRDC and Industrial Revolution 4.0, or Imagine Industrial Revolution, or new purpose, unifying force and catalyzing performance. The interventions, set targets, ensure accountability, ensure responsiveness, impact evaluation, and envisage outcomes, access to education, access to work integrated learning, throughput, and access to labor market. The commission outcomes are as follows. We spoke about what the state of affairs is, what the building blocks to take advantage of are, what are the gaps in the pathways, where are the potential areas of exploration, where should we put priority as a country, how we fast track existing and start many new initiatives. How fast are we going to do that? What are our blind spots? Because unless we address the interior conditions from where we are operating, it's going to be very difficult for us to manage these issues. Which aspect of the HRD strategies do we suggest strengthening? In terms of that state of affairs, we argued that the HRDC has a strategy whose focus on Industrial Revolution 4.0 or 5.0 can be strengthened. Other departments such as Science and Technology, Trade and Industry, Basic and Higher Education have started reviewing policies and programs. Private sector is perhaps more advanced. We are just making an assumptions and believing that they are moving ahead, they are going to drag everyone with. Labor still needs to systematically assess the potential effects to avoid the unintended effects of the revolution and guide labor response accordingly. If we can have a more integrated, interdisciplinary, multiple responses are required, policy and market incentives, action-oriented, joint assessment and planning, and also having the dialogue. The gaps are limited access to connectivity, as I indicated earlier on. More clear mapping of jobs and skills that South Africa will prioritize. Because if we don't map out those jobs or those roles, we'll still continue to have a problem. We might actually look the wrong direction. Limited interdisciplinary training programs in South Africa. Inadequate coverage of Industrial Revolution 4.0 in the NDP. So it means we have to get to a point where the National Development Plan begins to expand on issues like this. Time is up. What are the blind spots kind of our economy, and what will be the effects of Industrial Revolution to the South African labor? So because the time is up, we'll deal with these issues as you ask questions. Recommendations at the macro, meso, and macro level. Relevant organizations have to come on board and explore and propose the future of jobs in Africa, in South Africa. It always seems impossible until it's done. So if we don't start doing it, it will look impossible. And together we can do it. Thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you very much. It's yours for now. Any question? Because this is one of the subjects that start to be mind-boggling. Normally we say we should not live or fear of this thing, because if this is the fourth, it means there was a third and the second and etc. that have gone out, because life is not standing still. I remember, Comrade Connie, when the cell phones were coming up, your union sponsors a resolution in the COSATU Congress that we must not buy these phones. They are going to wipe all our jobs in terms of those things. Though indeed they reduced telecom and others in terms of dealing with those issues. But everybody were saying in the resolution, but people said, no man, this resolution is not correct. And they were buying those phones and those phones and those phones. Almost now, other people can't live without a phone. If he has forgotten his phone at home, his mind can't work. He can't even do the calculation. The old student, the old one like us, in the back of an exercise book, there was a timetable, 1 to 12. So you memorize it, you can calculate quickly. But now it's 12 times 12, people are looking for a computer. It just tells you and said how much it is. So it's going on and on and on. But what we will, of course, when we deal with these issues and comrades taking forward, is that we must not duplicate on this thing of future of work. And there's a lot of work that has been already done in terms of even what it means. Rather than being bogged down in terms of its meaning, we must be engaged in terms of how we address it as it comes. In dealing, because it's there, it's coming. How do we deal with them and make some choices? Even as a society, we need to make choices. If you want to take money from the bank and there's an ATM, where do you go? You are making a choice. Do you want to go to the queue, take money, or you want to go to the ATM, take money, and what does it mean? It may mean it's killing jobs. The choice that you may take might be killing somebody's jobs. But the inconvenience or convenience that goes with it. For an example, in many of the banks, if you bank money inside, the money you bank become less. They punish you for going to work for a human being. They said, no, if you want the value of your money, go for the machine. It forces you to deal with those issues. And if the society sit back, there are going to be implications for it. If we agree and make the choices that we choose robot against people, but at the same time, there will be digitalization that is required and is needed. For example, in the medication, we need it. Doing an operation now, your stomach may not be cut wide open, and you've got the scars of that operation can be done in a particular way, easy. So we were speaking here and said, do you remember those who were the fear of end of 1999? Do you remember the fear of 99? And so, oh, come the following day, your money will be gone, your record will be gone. And people are saying, can I get my money from the bank as quickly as possible because it's going to come. On that day, many people did not sleep, especially those whose salaries were going to come at the month, end of the month, said, no, will the machine know my account and give me money in terms of these things? So we're paralyzed by the fear of the Y2K coming up in terms of these issues. So we need to deal with these particular issues. The point, though, that we need to find out from this commission is that the just transition has to be managed. It's not an education issue alone. It's both of the interministerial that we need to engage in terms of how we deal with these issues. And the ILO is doing this in its centenary next year, these issues. And the debate from them is not about the fourth industrial revolution. It's the future of work. That's what we must be addressing. Where will our young people work? Where will the new generation we have come to this digitalization? For us, we said there's going to be a new definition of a workplace. You are going to be working almost 24 hours because you are going to be your workplace will change. You may get a computer, you may work at home, you may work at, it's going to disrupt even life. If your boss can give you work during the dinner table and say, in 5 minutes time, can you respond to these issues? And you leave everything, you go in and try to address these issues. Let's find a way of how we deal with those particular issues. There's a debate on the Sustainable Development Goals, and there's a portion of education and training, but there are many others that we need to be able to deal with it as we move forward. So, questions, clarity, Comrade Chair, any other hand? Yes? Okay, those are the 2 hands I've seen.
Thank you very much, Program Director and Secretary General of COSATU. I also agree with you that maybe the way we discuss it is maybe wrong. I don't think we should put all this fear into ourselves to the extent where all our discussions, even yesterday I heard, it started from the fear thing. Ooh, we might, it's going to be. Now, let's not do that to ourselves, to scare ourselves to the extent where we do not know how we're going to get out of the fear. So that's the first thing I want to say is we ourselves must change our own approach to this reality. So instead of starting with a threat, let's start with the opportunity that can derive out of this aspect. I agree that what we should do also is somewhere we've got to find in this entire discussion. This means the changing nature of the labor market and the labor market opportunities that will then derive out of this, that will create the following things, and therefore the new skills that needs to be looked at would be X, Y, Z, and so on. But here is the last thing that I want to say. Because you use the word all the time, the 4th industrial revolution. I kept on asking people, where's the 3rd one, the 2nd one, and the 1st one? I saw a little slide yesterday, so I took a picture of it, really to study this 1st one, 2nd, and 3rd one. Now, if there's a 4th one, why is there a fear of the fact that we are at the 4th one? But more than that, the word revolution means it's either a, a drastic overthrow of a government, or it could mean a change that is brought about and a change that can actually benefit everything. So I think maybe what we should do is to rather talk about in favor of a new system that should be the approach of the discussion that I want to suggest, Comrade Chair.
Oh, thank you, Chair. My name is Johan Maria. I'm a retired professor from the University of Cape Town in industrial sociology. And 2 years ago, I was asked to work for the Mandela Initiative on a project that looks at skills development with a view of creating jobs. And I just want to pick up from that comments that were made, particularly on the school-to-work problem that was highlighted. What we found is that there's an enormous lack of knowledge on the part of NEETs, of the youth who are growing up in disadvantaged communities and often lack a higher education or a good higher education, about what is available outside their own immediate circle. This goes from what jobs there are, but also what other opportunities there are for receiving training. And we also sit with this problem of that unless I got matric and university, I don't really have a career. whereas TVET colleges, as the minister emphasized, is really a crux, a crucial area to improve, and I'm very glad about the emphasis she laid, and it was laid here, on raising the TVET colleges to world-class standard and linking them up very closely in partnerships with industry and so on. But I've been applying my mind and in workshops about how do we improve communication of the youth locked in disadvantaged townships and poor areas. And the one is that there are two approaches. The one would be to have a center to which they can go and find out information. And I've looked around, what centers are there? Well, the Department of Labor has centers, employment centers, and I counted them. There are 114 in the country, about 15 per province. That is like 2 in Cape Town, about 3 in Johannesburg. That's totally inadequate. And most of the towns and villages are not covered. There's no center they can go to. Those need to be multiplied 10-fold, 100-fold, and maybe get the youth who are unemployed into jobs where they start centers with the department and give them jobs and help them help their youth, their fellow youth, to know where to go and what to do. The second way is that everyone's telling it, and again the Department of Labor has got an app, Employment Services South Africa, ESSA. And I've discovered there are at least 15 apps that all do that, that all try to do that. And say to someone, if you want education, where can you go? If you want to work, what do you do? These apps are very good. They play a role so far. We saw this need. I thought an important point was raised yesterday, that often these youth, they don't necessarily have the smart enough phones to do it, but if they have, data costs them, and we need to get hot Wi-Fi centers in all the townships where they can get free data, free downloading, free access, so as their communicability can improve immensely. And then finally, there's so much information around, and so many initiatives, like in entrepreneurship. There are already 214 organizations that are helping startups and young entrepreneurs and SMMEs. How do I know that? Well, there's an app, there's a website called Aspen Network for Entrepreneurship, and you just have to Google Aspen and you'll find all 214 and where they are, what they do, how to contact them. But who knows it? How many people know it? And especially, do they know it at all in the townships? So in a way, we also need an app for all apps, an app that if you want to know what apps are available on what area, you go to this app. And somehow, and these centers, if we can get thousands of these centers around the country, they can also put people onto those apps, or if people go to those apps, they also see, oh, there are centers in my area, somewhere close I can go to. So I just thought these might be ideas for implementation to, in fact, solve this enormous problem of unemployment and the need for skills development.
No, thank you very much. That's why in the council we must have the Minister of Information and Communications, communication. Because we got a public broadcaster, which in other countries you can just not even go to school, and you can just sit there and you got a class. Just sit there in terms of then you got a class, your whole class. I think was in Zambia where I saw it sometimes. You got top teachers in these things, just teaching every time in dealing with those particular issues. Come home, what do you watch? Something that really has no value to anybody. I mean, whether you miss it today, you join it tomorrow, you catch up as quickly as possible. At the prime time, not any other time, prime time, you get kind of these issues. So if we can talk about it, and sometimes industries are fighting because they're making a lot of money of these issues. So the question of communication, we have to address it. In other countries, you get a newspaper free. The newspaper in a bus stop, there's a newspaper there. You can get it, you can read it, and then all of those issues. Here, the newspaper is expensive. So it is the issue that I think we needed to find a way and debate and say, how best can we use this thing? The same thing that you were touching on, that if the cell phone as they progress, why this information can't be made available. Very few people still have dictionaries. You know, when we're growing, every kid in the list of books you get it, you must have dictionary, the Oxford and others. Now you don't have, you work with it. Somebody speak here, you can't get the word, you quickly go in the KPA, the one that you're asking, what KPA stand for, and it quickly tells you. So everybody look clever because you just need your cell phone and do this thing. So thank you very much for the input. Let's take the last commission.
Comrade, I heard they called you Comrade in Chalinchal. I had my hand up.
Yes, but I told you that when the time up, I don't see you. Okay, make it quick.
No, thank you. What I want to say, there is a study last year that was done, which said 90% of the wealth of our country is in the hands of 10%. And the 90% of the population has to share the 10% of the wealth. Now, when you look at revolution, there is going to be revolution when we move into the new technology. Somebody mentioned a quote from Mandela that I cannot recall quite correctly, but that the greatest resource, it's the people. I only hear machines, but I don't hear the people. Now, if you don't take someone along with you, and we seem to have forgotten the unemployed that have skills in the township, a plumber who does not have a certificate, a welder who makes butlers in the township, and those that are in the rural areas. I use telecom network and I battle here at Emperor's Palace to get network. Then what more of an individual who stays in the rural areas? So my point is that can we also, when we look at revolution, look at the people as the greatest resource, that you need to take them along when these changes come, because you will change the system, but if the people's mentality is not changed, then we are not going to achieve the desired outcomes. And I've never heard anyone referring to the National Development Plan other than people who spoke from a government point of view, who worked with the document. Because I think we also need to look at what it aims to achieve and how do we achieve halving poverty and unemployment by the set 2030 target. Thank you.
No, thank you very much. I don't want to take it. You are the last in terms of those things, so that we can move it on. But the point we are not even discussing here, even when we're talking about the youth, we're looking for the white shirt and tie kind of jobs. Maybe it's because the issue that Minister was raising, because we have degraded some of the jobs to almost absolutely no pay. Absolutely no pay. That nobody will want his or her kid to be taking that particular job, no matter how important it is. So the wage gap for a cleaner is regarded as for those who are just casted to poverty. When cleaning is so important, whether it's in hospital, you look to the gap of the cleaner there, and you look to the question of the nurse that make the operation possible, that the doctor, the surgeon can't work without that person. So degraded that that person can't come out there with that uniform that I'm a nurse in that particular things. Or even the teacher. I mean, there was a quote last week in Germany, Angela Merkel being asked, why are you why are you giving teachers more money than the people that other people? And she said, because they are made by that teacher. For them to be where they are is because of that teacher, and I need to recognize that teacher as playing an important role. Not that teachers, you go to be a teacher now because there is nowhere to go. The teachers are dumb as people, they need to go in there, when in fact, without them, you have to look back and say if they, I mean, there was a debate about teachers' education, I mean, colleges and etc. So the point is that we as the society were not playing our role in terms of channeling our own kids to some of this work, or even promoting these jobs. We're looking at men here, that many of them, they are bald-headed, and they are shaving their head somewhere. They have to go there, but they don't regard that work should be done by a human being. Because I can't do this work. Yes, I need to shave my head, but none of my kids should be doing that work. The hairdressing. In other countries, the hairdressing is a top job. People who train to be a hairdresser, and they're successful. Here, if you are going to be a shoemaker, the cobbler on the streets, is like, I can't do this job. It's not for me, it's for somebody else. Maybe it's good for foreigners who are really struggling in their countries and dealing with those issues. If we change the attitude of every job matters and every job must be compensated correctly, then we're going to be able to absorb some of the people that were dealing with those issues. But if we put pay forward, we're going to have a problem, because a taxi driver here earns as much money as the Cuban doctor.
Thank you. I'd like to pick up on what you said earlier on. I thought that was a very refreshing, different angle on a conversation. Typically, when we discuss digital revolution, we think this is a technology conversation, and then the question is, how can we as a country keep up technologically? But I don't think it's really a technological challenge. The technology will happen. We're talking about cloud. You can download today technology anywhere, best leading edge applications. But what we are not have given sufficient thought of is what does the technology to do us as a society. This discussion is there will be large-scale unemployment. Now imagine if we continue with the way we have been going about business in the last, God knows, 20 years, but even longer, that whenever we have too many employees, if they become redundant, we employ. Can we really continue operating like this? How is it possible that in South Africa, every second young person is unemployed and we think business as usual will continue? Let's have partnerships, but basically continue business as usual. Now, the real question of a revolution, as you indicated, is not a question of a technological revolution. It's going to be economic revolution, a social revolution, and I think there's much that South Africa probably can contribute to lead in the world. We have had massive social revolution in the last 20 years that has gone, maybe not to everyone's expectation, but there has been a large transformation happening anyway. So we have something called Ubuntu. Ubuntu meaning that we're all in this together and our collective welfare and individual welfare are interconnected. I think this is a unique concept for the whole world. We, as South African, can make a major contribution to the whole world in terms of transitioning in that new digital revolution.
Thank you very much. Can we move to the next commission?
The Honorable Minister, the DG, Deputy Chair of the Council, members of the Council, distinguished guests, good morning. I had actually, because we've been talking about the Industrial Revolution, the fourth Industrial Revolution, I'd actually prepared also to capture what we discussed, a video presentation that was to last about 3 minutes. Because of time constraints, but maybe I should beg your indulgence to play that, and then I'll be given about 15 minutes for my presentation.
How many of you are blamers? How many of you, when something goes wrong, the first thing you want to know is whose fault it is? Hi, my name is Renee. I'm a blamer. Let me just tell you this quick story. One's fault. Because why? Why? Because it gives us some semblance of control. But here, if you enjoy blaming, this is where you should stick your fingers in your ear and do the na thing, because I'm getting ready to ruin it for you. Because here's what we know from the research. Blame is simply the discharging of discomfort and pain. It has an inverse relationship with accountability. Accountability, by definition, is a vulnerable process. It means me calling you and saying, hey, my feelings were really hurt about this, and talking. It's not blaming. Blaming is simply a way that we discharge anger. People who blame a lot seldom have the tenacity and grit to actually hold people accountable, because we expend all of our energy raging for 15 seconds and figuring out whose fault something is. And blaming is very corrosive in relationships, and it's one of the reasons we miss our opportunities for empathy. Because when something happens and we're hearing a story, we're not really listening. We're in the place where I was, making the connections as quickly as we can about whose fault something was.
Thank you very much. I think by that, we're just trying to demonstrate that when it comes to work and learning, and what our group picked yesterday was that essentially there was so much of the blame game. And there are, in this area of work and learning, there are key stakeholders, that is the demand, supply, the government, and all. By demand here, we're referring to industry, supply to institutions. Now, when institutions produce graduates who go into the field and are not up to it, industry would blame the institutions. The institutions, on the other hand, will blame industry, that they are not given an opportunity to take their kids or students for industrial attachment and all. So it ends up becoming a blame game for all, whereas we really need to be working together to ensure that as demand as industry, we play a key role in terms of the curriculum development and all, affording the students the opportunity to do attachments and all. And therefore, there is need for the interrelationship between all the three. And we will also be blaming government that they are not giving us adequate funding for the programs that we would want to run. But at the same time, as industry, we need to also to contribute financially towards the training of our workforce and all. Now, in the presentation, I think we'll break it down into the key issues at a macro level and then the key issues at a micro level. Now, we've been able to pick that at a micro level, the key issues challenges was that there is lack of coordination of efforts and minimal sharing of the best practices. It is always important that there is coordination so that the left hand knows what the right hand is doing and the right hand knows what the left hand is doing. And again, as the Honorable Minister pointed out, the education system is producing job seekers and not job creators. Essentially, this is what we have picked as well. We're also seeing that most stakeholders within the education sector are operating in silos, hence unable to measure the impact of the individual organizations. And again, as we said earlier on, there is lack of coordinated cross-sector knowledge. Now, the solutions, essentially the solutions is strengthening of the partnerships. Now, there is need for partnerships between the institutions of learning across the globe. They could be the case of Botswana, RSA, South Africa, and Germany, and we are presenting here yesterday. That also, there is also need for a legal regulation requirements required to motivate the private sector to fully participate in the education cycle, and that there is also need to implement these multiple pathways. Some of the presenters yesterday in our group were saying that people are just channeled into our normal, typical social science programs at schools as against the technical and vocational, that we mostly view the technical and vocational as for those who are not academically gifted. And that the multiple pathways will be able to elevate and capture again the once how should I phrase it? And capture exactly one's potential, because we are gifted in a different way. There are those who are good in terms of the technical subjects, those who are good in terms of the thinking capacity and all. But our education system does not cater for that. And we are also saying that HRDC, as the coordinators, should be responsible for the coordination efforts to link work and learning. That HRDC should undertake research to share best practices obtaining in some institutions with respect to stakeholders for evidence-based decision making. What we are saying here is that there is some good practice out there, whereas industry and institutions are working closely. But some of those good practices are just going unnoticed because there is no one to coordinate that. There is no one to capture that. But that if there was an organization that would, at the macro level, that would be able to capture all those, then we would have a platform to adequately share the best practices and try to apply it across. We are also saying that there is need to infuse entrepreneurship into the curricula to create job creators, not job seekers. And recall that in the issues that we raised, that we are producing job seekers instead of job creators. And that we also need to develop sector-based curriculum programs. Now, key issues at a micro level. We are saying that learners from the universities lack technical skills, whilst those from the technical and vocational education training institutions are tuned up technically but have challenges in the soft skills. And that there are skills gaps between the tertiary education institutions and TVET, resulting in lack of experiential learning. And that there is an integration gap, that teaching is primarily theory-based. This is occasioned in part because there is no direct engagement between supply and demand. We are also saying that there are some programs that do not have provision for the internship. Again, this goes to the issue of partnerships between supply and demand, because in some instances, supply institutions are finding it difficult to place their students in the internships, and that it has come out that learners from the tertiary education institutions have better experiential learning as opposed to those in the TVET section. And I'm also saying that there is a challenge in finding competent educators who can deliver the right programs to the learners. Again, this calls for partnerships, and because when we engage stakeholders or from industry also to go and impart knowledge in the classroom. That would be a way also of bringing together supply and demand. And that there is also inability and unavailability of industry advisors to offer the required advice. It is important that we do have industry advisors who would be able to have an input into the curricula in the schools. And that way, we would ensure that the supply would be coming up with programs or the curricula that would have had an input from the industry, such that those who graduate then would have the necessary competencies that were a result of the input from the industry. And as for the solutions, we are saying that educators need to be properly trained so that their teaching is aligned to the fourth industrial revolution. It was coming out that in some instances, you would have a teacher graduating or a lecturer, maybe in a technical and vocational education, graduating, and they will not be taken for training, despite the fact that technology is changing. That lecturer will be operating a machinery that they were using 10 years ago, whereas in the current scenario, that machinery is obsolete, it is outdated. And therefore, there is need to continuously train even our educators. We're also saying that there is need to afford learners equal time for practical and academic learning, that we infuse both the soft skills and the technical skills, and that there is also need to align the learning competencies. As for the recommendations, again, we talked about the formation of the advisory committees. We're also saying that SADC must implement the industrialization strategy to form partnerships that will ensure that countries also share expertise, knowledge, and advise and assist one another. I talked about infusing entrepreneurship, and also that coordination, I think this is, and that there is also need for cost sharing to relieve paying of academic fees, because quite often when we are talking about the fees, the temptation is that we would blame government for not affording the necessary budget for the training. But this is all about us. All the stakeholders must play a part. When we are talking cost sharing, industry must also play a part in cost sharing. And we must also adopt cost sharing that should not be penalized those that will not be able to afford it. But so we need to engage in discussions, and that will be able to ensure that everybody participates and that we are able to work together. And that teamwork is key. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Any hands of clarity? Yes. Where is the mic? Okay. Can we give that lady first? You'll come to the front. I saw only two hands. Okay. Oh, that one.
Morning. My name is Kosi from Nehau. Throughout the presentations, I'm here on behalf of the TVET lecturers. I have not heard anything about reskilling the TVET lecturers, because as we are sitting in our country, none of the lecturers are qualified to teach in the TVET sector. Most teachers there are qualified to teach at basic education. They did their basic education training. And you find that we are busy with theory, because they do not have the expertise of giving them the skills, the proper skills. They are taught to teach basic education, then you're given a class in engineering. So what would happen is that You were just talking the other day with one of the lecturers that you would spend 3 weeks trying to theoretically explain a circuit to a student, and yet you could just, help them how it is built. Then afterwards, you come up with a theoretical background, but we are busy. So we have a tendency as South Africans of moving around the problem instead of facing it hands-on. So can we, as a matter of urgency, focus on reskilling the lecturers at the TVET colleges? Thank you.
Good morning, colleagues and Program Director, Minister. I'm from the Department of Defense. I'm representing the National Defense Force here. And I'd like to just comment, just overarching on the 4 commissions. And perhaps the main point came through in the last commission, the coordination of all the good practices that are existing, and how do we align and synergize and draw from it. And I think when I spoke to the Miss Brenda yesterday, I alerted her to the fact that the Defense Force is one of the largest training institutions that provides both theoretical and workplace learning, and we are getting it right. And over the past 5 or 6 years, government also came to us to look at the National Youth Service and trying to re-educate and bring about a change in the value system of the youth. The point I want to get to is that we need to look at what is working and how we can do it in the least cost-effective way, and perhaps draw in from our own historical best practices, Minister. Ma'am? Most effective, yes, yes. I said least, apologies. Because when we look at our history, most of the artisans that the country had in the past were coming through a process where they may have learned their initial trade through Defense Force experience. And so I just wanted to bring that to the table. And lastly, the point that and it's on the flashing on the screen right now, there is already a framework to bring about the partnerships. The Sectorial Education and Training Authority, the SETAs, were designed particularly for that, and yet I haven't heard anything about the partnerships that the SETAs, with all their challenges, because it's a new system, are trying to build. So why are we trying to build a new road or try to bring about a new way of doing things? So from Commission 1 to Commission 2, and I think the last commission in particular, how are we going to reinforce and support the SETAs to play that role, to do the research for the future economies, and to look at how it can be cross-funded? Because I would think that would be the way to go, to just look at what we have and start to build and get to step 10 now, not stay marking time on the same spot. But I do think we have got enormous best practices that we haven't really looked at to try and align. Thank you very much.
Thank you. When other people have spoken, then we react. That's why I asked in the beginning how many hands. Because I don't want to be provoked by other comments and then you raise your hand, because that takes us back to the commission.
You preempted my question. I had a simple question. How do you foresee in Commission 4 the role of the SETAs to play? You talked about industry advisory committees, about sector-aligned curriculums, about linking employers and educators. And I think the SETAs were originally invented for that. Our Minister of Education is here today. And in recent years, we have heard that the SETAs are considered to be redefined, to say the least, if not abolished. And I think this would be a crime in plain English, okay? South Africa is leading in the world. The 35 European countries trying to reinvent or copy what we're doing here in South Africa in terms of the CETA system. I think the CETAs have not been acknowledged for the massive contribution they have made in the country, and I think they can do much more, particularly the conversation we have had here in Commission 4, which I think is the heart of the whole journey, or using the words of the Americans are saying we need skills-based education. We don't need academic education. And I think we have a massively strong, seasoned systems in place that we're thinking to chuck out with the bathwater.
Thank you very much. I just want to before the minister takes over here, that maybe when we go to the next summit, the Secretariat should be able to tell the participant what road have we traveled, so that we don't repeat the same issues. We've been sitting in this meeting. We know this thing of silos has been repeatedly said. We're working in silos. Sometimes the people who say so are people in government. They're in government. We tell them we are working in silos. They come here and say, we're working in silos, it's a problem. Who's going to resolve that problem? Because they've been told they're working in silos. So that we don't become frustrated by what we have said. In the work of the HRDC, we work out with streams and we said, do the bottlenecking. What's the bottlenecking of not producing artisan in the manner that it was? So we go back to the defense, it's not new. We go back to the state-owned enterprise. We go back to the teachers and the reskilling and all those issues. So you get the sense that sometimes the questions are being asked are not questions, are the direction. The question is that why is it not happening? For us, we want to come here and say, can the Minister of Defense tell us what role is this playing? How many people have you produced? Don't tell us about the history. We know that's what was being done, including the discipline, because there's been acknowledgement that people who have gone through the defense were being told discipline. Just beside the question of the activities, the discipline, the question of drilling, which many people hate, is teaching you about the discipline. So, what therefore we need to be doing from government as we move it on is that, yes, I was there. You have to ask yourself, what role am I going to play? What have you learned from this input? And you take and internalize, because we had heads of the governments here. You look to the HRD Council, you look to the ministers that are serving there. They are made exactly that they must take forward the work and implement it. And where they've been bottlenecking, the HRD Council have been saying, this is the problem, this is the way forward, go and do it. So that next time we can be able to move it on. We're not taking these issues of supply side aggressively, because we do it in anticipation of the vacancies that will be created. Other countries, they were developing their young people even to an extent of exporting the skills they have, because they know that one day those people will come back to their country. They're making a huge contribution, the experts and the other people coming back from where they were and making that contribution. If you are doing it with some fear that once you have skilled them, they are going to leave, that's a wrong approach. Give them skills, then they will be able to deal with this issue. So the question of supply, I think here is correct, but the issue of demand must be addressed by the many people that has to be involved. The debate of jobs for young people, while it's understood it should not be meaning, because the young people are growing. They're young today, they're older tomorrow, move it on. It's not a park stage that they go in there, then they have to go on in dealing with those issues. So when we deal with the people, putting people in the sitters, getting skilled, a question must be asked later. What are they going to do with the skills, the experience, if the industry is not ready to employ them? Because they're going to be frustrated. They're going to do the Libya way, the Tunisia way. That they will say in Tunisia, if you were throwing a stone in the where people were marching, it is highly likely that when it comes down, it's going to hit a graduate. But the graduate has no job. So the challenge then changes, is that the people with skills, they have no jobs to work in dealing with those issues. And therefore, we must think forward in terms of how we address those issues. So let's conclude by appreciating the Commission's report, hoping that the Secretariat will be able to look at it and be able to say what is new, where we need work. We hope the Secretariat will be able to give to the role players. In the HRDC, there are project owners. Once a problem has been identified and the suggestion has been made, somebody must implement it. And we need to know who has to implement those issues, and I think the Secretariat will be able to do it. So thank you very much to the rapporteurs, your agenda balance. You can see the elders and the young, and so may you. Where is Ngonde? You have to come back now and be able to invite the minister. Okay, the minister, I think, wants to do some balancing of her notes. She doesn't want to say so. Yeah, don't interpret wrongly. We know that. Can we take a 10 minutes break? And we know because you are many, it might be 15 minutes break. No. Be practical. 10, you know, when you get invitation, it's at 9 for 8, 8 for 9. 10 minutes break. Please come back and we conclude. Thank you very much.